Let's see an example for working with UDP sockets in Node. To do so, we need to require the Datagram module, which provides an implementation for the UDP Datagram sockets. We then can use the Datagram create socket method to create a new socket. The argument for the create socket could be UDP4 or UDP6, depending on the type of socket that you want to use. So we're using UDP4 in here. And to listen on this socket, we use server.bind and give it port and host. I'm putting port and host here in constants because I'm going to reuse them for the communication. So the server object here is an event emitter, and it has a few events that we can register handlers for. The first event is the listening event, which happens when the UDP server starts listening. And the other event that we want to register a handle for is the message event. This event happens every time this socket receives a message. Its callback exposes the message itself and the remote information. So let's console log the remote information address and port and the message so that we know where the message is coming from. And that's it for the UDP server. We can actually run this code and the server will start listening for connections. So this part is the server, and I'm going to create a client in the same file here for simplicity. So since we do have this dgram required already, and we can actually share these three variables, so all we need to do is we need to create a client socket, which we can use the same call for. Let's call this client. And to send a UDP packet, we can use client.send. This method takes the first argument can be a string. So let's send plural site rocks. And we need to tell the UDP socket which port and host to send this message to. So we can use port and host in here. And this exposes an optional callback in case we want to handle the error in here. So if there's an error, we should throw it. And in here, we can console log something like UDP message sent. And potentially after we send this message, we can close the client in case this is the only UDP packet that we want to send. So we can test that. You'll see that server is listening, message is sent, and you'll see this code is getting fired with the right address port in there. Every time you create a new socket, it will use a different port. For example, let's put all this code in an interval function, and every second do all of this sending. Let's see what happens now. You'll see that every second we're getting a different port for the remote information. Let's undo this. So back to sending a message. This first argument here is currently a string, but it can also be a buffer. So let's create a new buffer. I'm going to call it message, and it will be buffer from this message. And I want to send this message, which is a buffer in this case. And when we have a buffer, we can specify where to start from this buffer and where to end from this buffer. So 0 and message.length will be equivalent to sending a string. So you'll see I got the same thing in there. So we're sending the buffer from 0 to message.length, and I can actually send the packet in multiple steps. So for example, let's send the first 11 bytes, which is plural site. And after we do that, let's send from 11 6 characters, which is going to give me the rocks message. So let's take a look at that. Now you'll see that the packet was sent on 2 steps. So we have Pluralsight in the first step and then space rocks in the second step. Let me undo that because we don't need it. So specifying an offset and a length is only needed if you use a buffer. The first argument can actually be an array of messages if we need to send multiple things.